Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 130 of Circle of Fellows. That's a big number when you stop and consider that we have been doing this monthly. But I'm Shel Holtz. I am the moderator for this session today. Brad Whitworth moderated a session earlier today with three of our new fellows. I have the distinct pleasure of being here with two more of our brand new fellows from the 2026 class, Catherine Ducharme and Sia Papageorgiou. And I should tell you that I am Senior Director of Communications at Webcor. We're a commercial builder in California and have been around IABC. Oh my God, it's almost 50 years at this point. Next year will be 50 years in IABC for me. So been around. Really happy to be here though. And Catherine and Sia, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Let's start as I see you clockwise on the screen. Catherine.
Yes. Hi, everybody. And I was going to say, Shel, that's cause for celebration next year, 50 years. So I'm Catherine Ducharme. I am a certified coach. I'm also principal of Fluency Leadership. And I work primarily with communications leaders and teams on developing leadership skills and team development. I've been involved in IABC since 2011 and have done many things, including running the chapter and past president of the Canada West region. I've been on various committees and so thrilled this year to be inducted as an IABC fellow. And I'm coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia today.
Outstanding. And Sia.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here for my very first Circle of Fellows. So I'm Sia Papageorgiou. I am based part-time in Melbourne, Australia, hence the accent, and I spend the other half of my time in Athens, Greece. So I'm the co-founder of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence. We're a global professional development and insights organisation, and we help communication professionals, leaders and teams across the world increase their communication capability. So we're all about strategic communication. Like Catherine, I've also been involved in IABC for many years. I joined in 2007. I have been very involved at the local, regional and international level over the years. So I'm the former president of IABC Victoria chapter here in Melbourne, the past board director of IABC Asia Pacific, and the past chair of the Global Communications Certification Council. I'm also very passionate about standards and certification, and I help prospective candidates gain their CMP and SCMP certification.
Outstanding. That sounds like a good place to start, Sia, since effective with, I think, the meeting next week, I am the vice chair. With automatic succession to chair of the Global Communications Certification Council. And I'm pleased to see your SCMP up on the screen. Tell me, and this is something that I've been really interested in lately, because over the last year I've been trying to spin up some marketing for the GCCC. What is the value of this from your perspective? Why should people who are serious about communication pursue certification?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that I get asked a lot. At the end of the day, though, if we want communication to be recognised as a management discipline, we have to hold ourselves to the same kind of professional standards as other management disciplines. And I always say, your credibility affects mine and mine affects yours. And at the end of the day, there are communication professionals practicing communication all around the world, and each one has come in through a different pathway. What certification does is it standardizes what we do. It benchmarks our strategic competence and our advice against a global body of knowledge. And what that does is it unifies us globally. So it doesn't matter where you are located in the world, what industry you work in, what geography you work in. It says that everybody provides the same advice. Everybody has met a certain benchmark or a certain standard of practice. Because at the end of the day, every time a communication professional gives poor advice, it doesn't just reflect on them, it reflects on all of us. At the end of the day, senior leaders, the very people that we are there to serve, don't separate the individual from the profession. And if somebody gives poor advice, they don't say, well, that person lacks training. They say communication doesn't actually operate at that level. And that reflects poorly on all of us. And so to me, it's all about respect. If we respect what we do, then we should be pursuing certification. And I personally think that all communication professionals should be certified to practice.
Couldn't agree more. And Catherine, I don't know what a PCC is, but I suspect one of those C's stands for certified.
Yeah, it does. And as Sia was talking, I was sort of likening it to, so I'm part of the International Coaching Federation, and the PCC is Professional Certified Coach. And to your point, Sia, it really is a way to hold the coaching profession to a standard. And what I also like about certification, and I know it's the same with the SCMP and the CMP, is how it fosters that continued learning and development. It's built in, so you're always current, you're evolving. Those code of ethics are sort of front and center. So that's PCC, Professional Certified Coach.
And Catherine, I want to turn to you with a related question. Coaching and communication are not the same profession, but there's definitely a connection between the two. Leaders who don't communicate are not terrific leaders. I'm wondering how you approach communication as a discipline when you are coaching leaders to be better leaders.
Yeah, it's that's a good question. So you're right that coaching is a little bit different, and I'm building upon 30 years as a communications professional, so sort of seeing the both one. And these days I'm working with a lot of leaders on those coaching skills, those communication coaching leaders, on their coaching skills. And it's not at all foreign to communicators who have those listening skills, have the ability to ask great, curious questions. I mean, that's the foundation of coaching. One of the biggest challenge for leaders as communications professionals, we're often paid to give our advice, to problem solve as part of our roles. However, in coaching, it's not about giving advice. It's asking the questions that help people unlock their own wisdom and transfer the learning that way. So it's interesting watching communicators go through coach training, because they definitely have so many of the skills, but that urge or need, and that was the toughest learning thing for me to sort of jump in and solve, is again a behavior change that's a little bit different, but a lot of similarities.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that I find that I do in my role as the head of the communications function where I work is coaching. Not something I was ever trained to do, certainly not something I've ever seen in the professional development that's available to communicators. But I'll throw this out to both of you. Is coaching something that communicators should embrace? Not being coached so much as being the coach to help people in their organizations or among their clients be better communicators in order to be better leaders or whatever they are.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Catherine. I
No,
hope you don't mind. Yeah. The answer to that is a resounding yes. That is part of our role, and I speak and work with a lot of communication leaders around the world, and we talk about becoming a strategic advisor, we talk about becoming a business leader, and that is one way that we can move into that space when we are teaching leaders, and not just leaders, but the entire organization, what good communication practice looks like, how to tell a consistent story both internally and externally, and also ensure that leaders understand that they are accountable and responsible for good communication practice. I think that's part of our role. Now, that, of course, takes a little bit of courage and the ability to work more closely with leaders. And if you've ever done that before, it could be a little bit challenging in the first instance. But ultimately, communication is about building relationships. And the more you build relationships with leaders, the more you understand their challenges, their frustrations, their day-to-day, what they care about. And they don't wake up thinking about communication. They're thinking about different things like risks and customers and productivity and performance and their culture of the organization. So the more we can move into that space, the easier our job becomes. And what you'll find is, and I talk about this in my communication training, the types of relationships we can have, the more you move into that space, the easier it is to build a trusted relationship with them. And you'll find that even though there may be layers of hierarchy between you, in those relationships, the coaching relationship, you are equals because you have skills that they don't have, and that's why they come to you. So the more we move into that space, the easier our job becomes, and the more we can move into the coaching, the listening, and the advising.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Sia. And particularly, I believe communication skills are influence skills. And I think communicators are so well positioned to be influencers through that relationship building, through building the trust, and that's across the organization. I mean, there's not many professions that have the purview that communicators do within organizations. And I think leaning into curiosity, asking questions, way more effective than those persuasive statements. I do a unit on influence, communications, communicating with influence. And a big part of that is if we lean into curiosity, there's no space for judgment. I mean, I love that whole notion that judgment and curiosity can't hold the same space. And the answers you get with those curious questions really change the nature of the the dynamic of the conversations, because by asking questions, people are coming to their own conclusions, which they then own and buy into a lot more. So there's so much around, those communication skills, that ability to coach, ask questions, focus on getting it right, not being right, that communicators bring to the table.
You use the word influence, Catherine, which I find fascinating these days. We have people who are making a living being influencers, and in communications, we've talked for decades and decades about reputation. We haven't talked much about influence, but if you're going to drive the reputation of an organization, influence seems to me the way to do that. How important is influence as a element of communication these days?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Sia, do you want to jump in?
You go. You can go, and I'll.
Sure.
I've got my own views, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think influence in an organization is really the ability to be seen and heard and valued, no matter what your position is in the organization. And because communicators have this, unique situation of seeing an organization strategically, we're able to build relationships horizontally across the organization, to seed ideas, to ask the good questions, to have impact in a number of ways beyond even communications. That's that business leadership that you talk about, Sia. So I think that skill of building influence in an organization is a huge untapped area for communicators.
Absolutely. And Catherine, that's absolutely spot on. For me, it all comes down to you can't build influence in an organization if you don't understand the organization, you don't understand the business. And we talk a lot about being strategic. Personally, I think strategic is one of the most overused words in our profession. We talk about business acumen, and you know, I have a lot of conversations with communication professionals around the world, as I mentioned earlier, and you ask a communication professional if they understand their business, and the answer is usually yes. And while you may have a general knowledge of what the organization does, you may have read the company plan or understand the new strategy. But as I said earlier, leaders don't wake up thinking about communication. And I think we tend to ask the wrong question. We ask the question, why don't leaders understand communication? The better question is, have we demonstrated that we understand them and our business? Because at the end of the day, leaders care about very specific things. And so we need to get better at trying to put ourselves in their shoes to try and understand what's going on. And so when I ask leaders, communication leaders, do you understand your business? I actually, in my training and my coaching, I actually test them on what they know about their business, because it's one thing to have a general a knowledge about what's going on. It's another thing entirely to have a meaningful leadership conversation about the organization, about its risks, about how it makes money, about where it distributes its money, about the culture of the organization, about its customers, about all of those things, not in communication terms, in business terms. That's another skill entirely. So I think, your communication expertise will get you into the room, so to speak. It's not going to keep you there. If you want to build influence, you need to build better business understanding, which then builds trust, which then opens those doors.
Yeah, 100%, Sia. I think meeting people where they're at, understanding what's important to them, what are the business outcomes, what's getting in their way, and that's where all those beautiful coaching questions come in, can really build that bigger picture, and also really show those avenues where there's opportunity to even have more impact and influence in the business once you really know what the issues are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's really two dimensions to this idea of being able to talk fluently about business. First, it's knowing your business, whatever business you're in. It was always very interesting for me because I've never worked in the same industry twice. I moved from energy to financial services to toys, which is retail and entertainment and fashion all rolled up into one, and pharmaceuticals and now construction. So I've had to learn 5 different industries, but also business in general, right? I mean, understanding the notion of business. You made the point that no CEO wakes up in the morning thinking about communication. Now, to be fair, I did have one CEO. I remember taking in the tissues for the annual report so he could sign off on the general theme and approach. And he looked at it very carefully, and he looked up over the rim of his reading glasses, and he said, "There's too much space between the lines." So he was actually concerned about leading, which I thought was just precious for a CEO. But in general, they're not worried about how many hits something got or how many views or what kind of reach. And I have heard communicators who have gone into the executives and talk about ROI when what they were talking about was results, but not ROI. Because ROI is a very specific and well-defined accounting formula. And I just have to imagine that the leaders in the organization, when the communicator walks out of the room, look at each other and goes, "He doesn't know what ROI is," So how important is it that people, in addition to understanding their own industry, also understand the fundamentals of business?
I might jump in there. Incredibly important. Incredibly important. And you mentioned ROI, and this is an area we still haven't mastered. I don't know what needs to happen in order for us to to grasp the importance of demonstrating value. We talk about demonstrating value, but what happens usually is a communication leader or a communication team will, as you said, Shel, enter the CEO's office or address the C-suite and provide a laundry list of activity. So we've done all of this activity over, and people equate being busy to being valuable, and it's not the same thing. And we still haven't mastered the art of effective measurement and evaluation. I always talk about measurement and evaluation as though, it's one thing to collect the data. It's another thing entirely to turn that into insight that your C-suite cares about. So data is a story waiting to happen ultimately, but we need to get better as an entire profession to measuring outcomes instead of outputs. And we talk about that a lot. If you look at the IABC Gold Quills, for example, we talk about outcomes over outputs. Certification talks about the same thing. Generally, we talk a lot about it. I don't see much doing. I don't see much of communication leaders taking that to their C-suite and saying, you know what, this quarter we have increased knowledge, we've changed perceptions, we've changed behavior. And then that final step, as you mentioned, the ROI, what that actually means to the organization is less complaints, fewer safety incidents, more productivity, which then all of these things have a bottom line impact. We need to make that link between what we do in the communication space versus the outcome for the business. So that I don't think we've mastered, but that's incredibly important. You want to build influence, you want to build trust, you want communication to be seen in the same light as every other function in the organization. All roads lead from measurement and evaluation. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I agree. It's the business outcomes. And as you mentioned earlier, CM, probably you, Shel, I've been hearing the same narrative for 40 years. I feel undervalued. I'm not tapped in. How do we get a seat at the table? Why don't people understand us? And I think that's the missing link. Understanding the business, impacting the business outcomes is where you build the credibility and the gravitas for the role. And I know there's, communications professionals out there doing that in a lot of ways, but that's what's going to move the needle.
Yeah, Jim Lukashevsky, who is an IABC fellow and has been on Circle of Fellows many times, during one of the Circle of Fellows, he was rather contemptuous of the whole idea of the seat at the table. He said, "Where is this table exactly? How big is it? What's it made of?" He said, "You don't want the seat at the table. You want to be the person who they call before they go in for the meeting at the table." Yep. He says, "That's influence." He says, that's being consequential in the organization. I think part of that, and this goes back to that idea of what the CEO is thinking about when he wakes up, is what does keep them awake at night? And is the work that you're doing helping them sleep better? And how many communicators would raise their hand if you asked, what keeps your CEO awake at night? Or they would just say something like, well, revenue.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? And I love James Lukashevsky, and I quote his book in my training because, that point you made just now, Shel, about you want to be the person they call on. I love there's a line in his book where he says, if you arm yourself with the right insights, if you do your research, if you measure what matters, you become the table. So I love that concept. But one thing I always bang on about, and certainly in my training, is for communication professionals to change their mindset. I'm not sure why communication professionals feel that they are separate to the rest of the organization. And ultimately, we are business people just like everybody else. So I always say you're a business person first and a communication professional second. You have a very specific skill set, and that is communication. Nobody else has that strategic communication capability. But you're also a business person. So understand your business, understand your leaders, understand where the organization is headed, understand its risks, understand its opportunities. When you have that knowledge, you use your communication skill to influence where the organization goes next and help the organization make decisions. And that's the place we want to be. We don't want to be the function that is the place people go to last. Well, they've done all the important things. They've done all the decision, the planning, and then they come to us and say, oh, over to you now to execute. That's not a very powerful position, is it? So we want to take our power back, so to speak, and be part of that decision making at that in the rooms where the important conversations are being had.
Yeah, I agree with you. It sort of brings to mind a story when I was with an organization. It was a tech organization at the time. They weren't even sure what communications was, but they figured they better hire a director of communications. So yeah, a lot of it was the educating around it. And so you often found yourself not being brought into things or cleaning up the messes and so forth. I'd give the counsel the next time, they'd listen a little more, but within a couple of years, I actually got to that point, and I was part of the senior management team sitting around impacting the decisions, where it was like any initiative that came up in the organization, it was like, well, let's get Kath in the room. We need the communications lens on this, no matter what the business issue was. And that's totally achievable if we're showing up in that way. I tend to say, communication may get you a seat at the table, but the leadership determines the contribution you make once you're there. Like, what else are you doing that's even beyond the craft of communication that's really contributing to the decisions?
Absolutely.
We have about less than 5 minutes left, and want to wrap up with this. I mean, one of the things about becoming a fellow, it means you've been around a while. There's nobody who's been a communicator for a year who becomes a fellow. Over the course of your careers, you have undoubtedly learned a lot. What would your advice be to somebody who is just coming into this profession?
Do you want to, I'm trying to, my mind is pinging all over the place so much.
Sure.
So much.
So my advice to people who are entering the profession is, firstly, something that has served me very, very well over the years, and that is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. If I'm sure we've all heard the saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So that's number one for me, and that's something I've always tried to do because I am a lifelong learner, and I am continually learning. I've been working in communication for 30 years, but compared to some, that's nothing. So I'm still learning. I'm still being curious about things, and ultimately every role that I've ever had over my 30-year career has taught me something about people, not necessarily about communication, but about people, because we talk about changes in the profession and where the profession is headed, where it's come from, how it's evolved, and it has evolved, but ultimately human behavior hasn't, and communication is a human function. So learn about the people you work with, learn about the leaders, find out about your business, find out about what's important to people. Don't focus just on the discipline you're working within. So if you're working in internal communication, don't just focus on internal communication. Focus on what happens outside your organization. The more you know, the more influence you will have, the more trust you will build, and build those relationships. Invest in your relationships, and the rest will follow.
I love that. What I would add to that, because a lot of the ongoing learning, when's the day we know it all, right? Never. Is the relationships along the way, and building those relationships, being part of IABC, for example, the number of friends, clients, colleagues, people I can bounce things off. It's sort of that, sword sharpening swords when you're, surrounding yourself with those people. But it's those relationships that can help you, and you can also help people along the way, because the work gets done, we operate, we move forward based on relationships. So I think that's essential that we cultivate them, and we cultivate that through networking. The other thing I would say is don't overlook your gut. You know, we have as many neurons in our gut than we do in our brain, and that's our inner knowing, our inner wisdom, and listening to that. And my career has taken many twists and turns and very interesting opportunities. And a lot of that has been following my gut when it says, is there more here? I'm feeling a little restless. What can I explore? You know, maybe I'm holding back because of fear. So I think listening to your gut, building relationships, and leaning in with that curiosity and that constant learning.
Well, it's been delightful chatting with you both. Wish we could go on. I have tons of other topics that we could talk about, but this was scheduled for half an hour. I think usually these are an hour, but because we had 2 of them with 5 fellows, if you combine them together, it's actually an hour and 15 minutes for this round. But I think it's easy to see why you are both fellows from the brief conversation that we have had today. I do want to let everyone know to put on your calendars that the next one of these, going back to our regular discussion around a single theme, is episode 131, scheduled for noon Eastern time on Thursday, July 23rd. And I wish I could tell you what the topic was, but I don't remember and I can't find it. But watch for the announcement. It'll be coming through a number of channels, including directly from IABC through Catalyst. And it will be announced on LinkedIn and all the other socials because we get the word out there. And I can tell you who's going to be participating. That's going to be Diane. This says Diana. Now I'm confused. I was thinking that was Diane Gajewski, but it's Diana Deegan, Ned Lundquist, Martha Muzichka, and Jennifer Waugh will be our panelists. So it should be a great discussion about whatever the topic is. That information.
Wonderful.
And I hope that everybody has a great month between now and then. Again, thank you both for participating in this today.
Thanks for having us, Shel. Anytime.
Yes, thanks, Catherine.
Good
to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.